Hello, and welcome back to The 10th Man. This is episode 27. It is Saturday, May 23rd at the time of filming. I am very excited to bring this episode to you today. I had a great conversation with a very long time friend of mine. We go back to elementary school years, and he's a lawyer here in Sacramento. He practices out of Elk Grove, and we've been talking for a while about getting him on the show. He offers a lot of great insight, and I like to think of him as kind of a version of me, but smart, especially in terms of all this COVID stuff that's going on. So we had a really good conversation, just kind of catching up on old times, discussing where he's been in terms of the law world and how the law world has changed over the last 10 years or so, and how things are looking forward going ahead with what's going on with COVID-19. So please check it out. I hope you enjoy. Um, so we're back again for take two here. One of the things I'm learning with podcasting is there's a lot of time and trial and error that goes into it. So appreciate having you back on here. Don't know if should I call you Mr. Marar now?
No,
Tofik
no, go
Marar
by Tofik.
Esquire.
Tofik keeps it simpler. Not Tofik. Tofik is good.
Yeah, so Tofik and I go back quite a long ways, right? It's elementary school days.
Yeah. We go back to the early '90s.
Yeah,
Without getting into details,
right.
yeah, the early
Yeah, I
'90s.
know you're conscious of revealing our ages, so
Yeah. As you get older, you got to be a little more conscious,
right.
because the numbers tend to creep up on you.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today. Uh, as you know, I've been kind of talking a lot of COVID lately, and I understand you've got a blog, and you've been talking about it as well. So I kind of appreciate having some expertise on the show.
No, sure. It's whatever we can offer, whatever advice we can offer. As an attorney, maybe I look at this from a different perspective as the layman, in terms of advising businesses and advising clients. So
Right.
whatever we can offer to the listeners out there, your listeners, my clients out there, we'll do. We'll do.
Well, yeah, before we get into all that, I'd like to kind of jump back in time a little bit. I know, you and I haven't seen each other in, I don't know, well, like I said, you don't want to necessarily say the years, but it's been a while, and we both kind of graduated and went our separate ways. So, what got you into pursuing law, and how did you find yourself there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's okay for people to know that we've known each other. Chris and I, we go back elementary school, middle school, high school.
Yeah.
When I finished high school, I finished high school and we finished, right when the second Gulf War, the Iraq War was starting, and I knew that I wanted to do something when it came to human rights or international rights. So I went to my undergrad, got my degree in international relations. I went into law school a couple years after that, and I really had this bastion, this passion to make a change in the world, which I think so many people we believe that when we're younger. So I went into law school, wanted to do human rights law or international law, refugee rights, and it wasn't long after getting into that, maybe halfway through law school, that I figured, hey, I'm not going to make any money doing any of this. I got a lot of expenses. I'm going to have student loans to pay, expenses for my family,
Right.
and it's there's no money in that kind of stuff, especially sort of being in Northern California where I was situated. A lot of the big institutions are either based out east or they're in Europe or overseas. So I sort of segued to doing something which I was always passionate for as well, was small business law, caring for the mom and pops in the community and those small businesses, and that's what I segued into, and I've been doing that ever since. When I first finished law school, I was actually working in the bankruptcy court in downtown
Nice.
Sacramento, and I think being exposed to the kind of cases that come to bankruptcy court, you see it all. You see consumers that go through financial struggles, whether they have credit issues, tax issues, business issues. You see businesses that go into financial struggles. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now with the COVID issue
Right.
reminiscing and starting up again. And then I opened my own practice shortly after that in 2014, and I've been doing it ever since, doing commercial law, transactional law,
Hmm.
business law type stuff, and also doing quite a bit of estate planning, wills and trusts, things like that. So it's
Right.
been well. It's been good. You meet some of amazing people. I love my clients to death. Each one of them is a unique story that I am honored to be a part of and help facilitate every step of their legal journey,
Right.
their legal process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you find like that the world of law has changed over the last 10 or so years, and have you changed with it? Like, are you still able to hold on to that idealistic Tofik that got you into law in the first place?
That's a great question. I think maybe it's a challenging question. Am I still able? I'll do the second part first. Can I remain the
Yeah.
idealistic Tofik? I think you can't help but have that goal of perfection in terms of the kind of change you want to do. And I think
Right.
regardless of what your career is from 8 to 5, or regardless of what what kind of law you practice as an attorney, um, each person, regardless if they're an attorney or not, should have a passion that drives them. They have to have a passion that
Right.
drives them. In that case, my passion still stays the same. It's just a matter of time before I convert that passion into full time career type thing. But there's so many. I mean, there's so many. There have been so many changes you can say over the past several years since I was in law school 10 years ago to what's going on now. I mean, I think that the study of law has changed in terms of the cost of education has just skyrocketed since I was there.
Right.
Um, I think the income disparity and the fact that the income and the earning capacity for attorneys has not necessarily went up dollar for dollar for what the cost of education was,
Right.
what the cost of education has become. It's very expensive to go to any graduate school, any
Yeah.
professional school is very. I mean,
Absolutely.
Chrissy, you know this. You and your family know this. It's very expensive to go to any professional school. And one of the interesting things with attorneys is unless you're really able to break into that high paying, 6-figure job, which are actually very limited, not like what you see on TV. They're actually very limited. Unless you're able to break into those, um, you sort of scratch your head and say, is it worth the financial investment I'm going to make that I am going to make
Right.
into going to law school and becoming an attorney? And I think that's really the third point. People ask, and we talk about the cost of education, we talk about the earning capacity. Then you say, hey, where's the prestige in this? I rarely come across, I rarely had any law school friends who say, hey, I want to be an attorney because I like the prestige. There's no prestige in what we do.
Right.
It's not like what you see on Suits or these shows. A lot of it's more of a hustle and a grind initially.
Right.
I started watching the show, and you and I talked about this. The show Better Call Saul,
Yeah.
not
Love
too
that
long
show.
ago. And
Yeah.
you put aside put aside the illegal things he does, that Jimmy
Right.
McGill or
Right.
Saul Goodman does. But a lot of that struggle you see Jimmy McGill in the precursor character. A lot of the struggles you see him going through. I think any small attorney or any young attorney can really relate to.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
long hours, the not knowing where your next paycheck is going to come
The
from.
having
And
a office as like a broom closet in the back
oh
of
my
some
God,
shop.
when I first started practicing law, I used to meet my clients at a coffee shop. I didn't have an office.
Really.
I used to meet them at a coffee shop, and I was thinking, all right, this is crazy, it's awkward, but you'd be surprised how many young attorneys do that. And now
Yeah.
looking back, and now I have an office, and there's people that help me in the office as staff.
Right.
There's a meeting room and all this stuff. You got all the fancy printers and those things. But looking back, I can never look down on anybody who's trying to hustle their way into becoming a lawyer. You can
Oh,
never, because
absolutely.
I did it myself, and I think that's where you appreciate and you gain that respect for the profession. Put aside all the negative stuff you hear about attorneys, and there are a lot of negative stuff, and some of it is well deserved. Um, but somebody who's really hustling and trying to make it as an attorney, they're going to have to work outside the box, think
Right.
outside the box, because you know you're up against these big corporate lawyers, and a lot of these big corporations that have hundreds of attorneys, whether it's law firms or as international business corporations. You're struggling against them at times. And
Right.
when you're in an adversarial proceeding, you'll be finding yourself working from home if you're a sole practitioner often. You'll have your house cluttered with papers. Work follows you everywhere. You
Right.
don't have a support staff. You don't have associates. You don't have paralegals. Those kinds of things. A lot of people don't. And so you really struggle, and it hits you financially because you got all these expenses. It hits you mentally because you're doing it all on your own,
Right.
and it's a challenge. It's a challenge for a lot of young attorneys, and I think we all go through that. I went through that. Everybody goes through that. And looking back years later, you say, hey, it was a great experience for us to go through. It was an amazing experience for us to go through because we saw what the struggle was that comes to the career.
Right.
I liken it to a doctor who's spending their first year or two as a resident, in which they're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, making pennies on the dollar, but they're doing all the same hard work that every specialist or every a tenured physician is doing in the
Right.
hospital. And that's sort of their initiation. So as
Yeah.
attorneys, that's sort of our initiation.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I think it requires just such a, amazing level of just a mental fortitude and really, my father was a lawyer also. Actually, he
Mm-hmm.
went to the same school that you did
Yeah,
because you went to McGeorge, right?
correct. Yeah, I
Um,
went to
yeah,
University of Pacific, McGeorge. Yeah.
yeah. So I have maybe a different perspective than the average person on lawyers because I see the other side of it. I see the part that comes home and
Yeah.
the part that kind of he actually worked. He was a defense attorney and actually worked in for a while. He worked in homicide and I mean that's and I guess what I'm saying is for me, I grew up with a different perspective in terms of not judging people
Mm-hmm.
and not judging situations that you don't know the whole story. And I mean, it's easy for somebody to say, like, oh, public defenders are terrible. They just defend the scum of the earth. But you might be on the other side of that one day, where you need an attorney, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's easy to judge, but you never know what situations you're going to be in, and it gets back to the Constitution. I mean, it's our rights as citizens to have a fair trial, and so for me personally, I mean, I admire lawyers. That's not to say that corrupt lawyers don't exist. Absolutely, there's going to be bad apples in every profession. Obviously, we see that
Yeah.
law enforcement as well, but in terms of what you do, I think it's really important. And like I said, I grew up seeing the dark side in the sense of just kind
Yeah.
of what it does to you emotionally. Um, so yeah, I mean, definitely have to have a strong head on your shoulders to do what you do.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about law is there's so many different sectors, there's so many different fields of law you can get into. I primarily practice civil law, as opposed to criminal law. And even if somebody practices civil law, they can be doing things from, real estate, commercial real estate, where they're dealing with, sophisticated investors, sophisticated sellers. You can be doing family law, where you're dealing with, divorce and custody and domestic violence all the time. You're dealing
Hmm.
with bankruptcy, where you're dealing with people who are going through financial struggles, or in the case of your father, you could be in the criminal law
Right,
arena, where you're dealing with either prosecuting the accused, or defending the accused. You mentioned constitutionally,
right,
there's always the assumption of innocence, and it's on the government to
right,
prove the guilt. And so, as an attorney, I did a few criminal law cases in my early years. As an attorney, you got to remember that you have to presume the innocence of the accused, and the government's going to have to
right,
prove their guilt.
right,
And so it doesn't necessarily make your job a lot easier, but it's seeing those things where you have somebody's livelihood at stake and being accused of crime. It could be a lot more detrimental in terms of what's at risk
right,
in the walls of that courtroom, as opposed to a civil trial, or a landlord tenant trial, or
right.
something where there's money involved, this insignificant amount of money, as opposed
Right.
to somebody's livelihood or liberty or
Yeah.
freedom.
Or criminal trials, just yeah, your life could be at stake. I mean, or at least life as you know it. So
Yeah,
it's definitely, and then of course that's also the other dark side of, especially with criminal law. This when your case doesn't necessarily work out, sometimes you might have a client that remembers you,
yeah,
and he did get. I mean, my dad got threats every once in a while after the fact sometimes. So yeah, it's a tough job. Um, I'm curious. The reason why I kind of asked about how has law changed for you. Kind of getting back up to speed with COVID and everything. I think that in general, even not even necessarily referring to COVID, but just social media and I mean, even like what we're doing right now, the
yeah.
fact that like being able to podcast remotely like this has become so much easier with technology. I'm curious how, and again, I'll give you a chance to kind of talk about your website and your blog because I know you do some videos also. How has that part of the law changed for you in terms of how you market yourself, and then also how, getting up to speed with COVID, I've got to imagine that that's even change things to a whole nother degree. How are you
Yeah.
managing all that?
Yeah, I think like in any industry, you have to adjust for the technological advancements and how those impact society. In the healthcare field, telemedicine is really booming, getting people being treated in the comfort of their own home rather than having to come to a hospital or healthcare clinic. Um, grocery services now, you shop online, stuff gets shipped to your door rather than you having to go to the grocery store. And this is a lot
Right,
of these things predated the COVID crisis. But I think
right,
even as an attorney, where marketing is no longer really the yellow pages like it used to be, the pack bill
right,
yellow pages. It's online, so you got to know how to use
right,
online marketing. A lot of clients, the vast majority of clients are going to learn from you either through Google or Facebook or some of these social media platforms. So having a decent presence there, and there's such the thing that I think catches clients the most is the access to information. You got to make information known.
right,
I have a blog you mentioned that I keep on my website. I publish articles every so often. I do videos, and these are free. We don't charge anything for these, and it's for the clients to really get free information because that's what they want. They want initially
right,
to get, hey, I have questions about estate planning. What's the difference between a will and a trust? I have a question about the COVID crisis. What are the benefits of the CARES Act or the upcoming Hopeful Heroes Act? What does this tax credit mean? How can I get this small business SBA loan? So you make that
right.
information available. And I think
Yeah,
once clients see that there is a face on the other side of the screen, they're able to get a lot of questions answered. During
right,
the COVID crisis of the past couple of months, we've really seen a shift in client inquiries from business formation or litigation, starting litigation or forming businesses, to really business protection and estate planning. A lot of
right.
people on the
Hmm.
estate planning side, they're concerned. They see, the media hype on TV every day, on the computer every day, on the radio every day about illnesses and deaths, and they think, hey, this could be me. This could be my friends, my family. So they're asking about estate planning, wills, and trusts all the time. A lot of people were thinking of forming businesses or establishing new businesses, going into the springtime, the summertime, which is common. But now they're asking if they're going to have a paycheck when they start those businesses.
Right.
Where's this money going to come from? A lot of banks are not lending money. A lot of people are hesitant to invest because economically the world is still shut down. So
Yeah.
we went from forming new businesses to a lot of existing businesses saying, "Hey, Tofik, when can I send my employees home? When can I rehire my employees? When can I open my doors again? And what liability do I have in doing that? How can I protect my business?" Um,
Right.
that's what sort of drove me to draft this new blog article I put out there. In California, the world is opening up again. And that's what they say.
Right. Hmm.
Businesses are opening up, some retailers are opening up. It's still a while until we see some of these hospitality businesses like barbershops and massage parlors and nails open or gyms open. But
Hmm.
a lot of economic things are opening up. So a lot of business owners are
Yeah.
asking themselves, "What do I do?" And so I tell them you got to ask yourself three questions: Are you allowed to reopen? Have you been given the green light by the federal government or the state government or your local county or city government? Are you considered an essential business? Or if you're non-essential, are you allowed to open? And once you answer that, and let's say the answer is yes, you got to ask yourself, is it safe to open? Do I have all of the needed precautions? Do I have the right staffing? Do I have the means to keep my customers and my patients socially distant from each other? Is my business big enough to keep people 6 feet away? Do I have PPE? Do I have masks and gloves I can give to my employees, my
Right.
assistants, my customers if they ask? Do I offer accommodations for people that do not want to enter into the business? Do I offer a curbside pickup? Is my ventilation system up to par? Do I have sneeze guards or those plexiglass shield you put in front of the cash registers? So is it safe? And hopefully, if you're able to answer that yes, it is safe to open, then you ask yourself, is it smart to open? Is this the right time for me to open? Can I
Hmm.
ensure that I'm going to be stepping up my compliance, stepping up my disinfecting, stepping up all the necessary things that I have to do to keep my business safe? And hopefully,
Right.
if you feel that you're allowed to open, it's safe to open, and taking all these things into consideration, it's smart to open. That we encourage people if you can. I tell my clients if you can open, you
Right.
have to generate some form of revenue for you and your family. Do it. Maybe do it on a limited or restricted basis initially, until you learn the kinks of the system, see how the industry changes have been. And this varies industry to industry. I mean, healthcare is
Right.
different than restaurant service. It's different than workplaces, different than grocery stores. Every industry is different. you check out the blog online, maybe we can share a link later. We go through some of these checklists you want to keep in mind. But it's going to be a different society. It's going to be really
Yeah,
different out there, and I think it's on each of us, and it's incumbent on each of us to acknowledge that and appreciate that there is going to be some level of inconvenience we're going to go through, and
right.
we don't have much of a choice because none of us decided to be in the situation. None of us chose to be in the situation,
Yeah,
and we sort
yeah,
of have to deal with it until we get over this hurdle, hopefully, as a society, and
right,
return to life as we once thought it was as normal.
right. Yeah, I think that those three questions that you ask there are, well, first of all, I mean, I really appreciate, and again, part of why I want to bring you on the show is uh, you really show a lot of sincere concern for this whole process, both in terms of like public health, but also from the legal perspective. And liabilities come up, like you talk about. Is it smart to reopen? People, you don't want people getting injured or sick at your store. And I think it speaks to the bigger picture of, like you mentioned, that you like to provide information for free. I think that that's so important, especially in today's age of information and false
Yeah,
information. It's so easy to go online and be misled.
yeah,
I think it helps build that trust also with your clientele. And also, I wanted to say those three. I mean, you should write a book or something, or maybe be a motivational speaker, because I think those three pieces of advice are kind of transcend uh, businesses reopening, but it's kind of just good advice for life in general. Like any life choice you
yeah.
make, is it legal? Is it safe? Is it smart? I think those are things that we could all probably try to do a little bit more of assessing ourselves in that
Yeah,
light.
when I was in my first year of law school, my torts professor said, go out today. Your assignment class is like my first week, maybe or first second week. So go out. Your assignment is just walk around society, car shops, the dealerships, wherever it is, and ask yourself, do I see a possible tort? Do I see a possible hazard or injury that can take place? And so we came back, like a
Right.
class of like 50, 60 people. We came back, and it was like a laundry list of stuff. And she was like, all right, and throughout the semester, throughout the years of law school, we start to think of things differently from a liability perspective. How can we insulate ourselves from liability? And so you take that
Right.
list you saw of everything in society that's a potential liability. Um, it really makes you think of it a lot differently. It's not just from a legal
Right.
perspective. And I think, like you mentioned, something that really transcends COVID. We saw that a lot of employers, they've used this COVID timeline to really learn a lot about employee rights and employer rights too. A lot of employees have used this timeline to learn about some of the public benefits that are available to them, be it through unemployment or other healthcare benefits they have. A lot of people have learned the difference between constitutional rights and civil rights and private rights
Mm-hmm.
because of things that we see on the
Right.
media all day. We've learned a lot
Yeah.
about disability rights. What are your rights in terms of wearing a mask versus not wearing a mask? We've learned a lot about, unfortunately, exposure in the healthcare field. What are some of the
Right.
societal challenges that we have that a lot of people go through that we take for granted.
Right.
You never think that the frontline workers can be janitors and cooks and maids in hospitals,
Right.
but lo and behold, they're the ones who are working a lot harder and are putting themselves at risk a lot more than people like you and I. And historically, these
Right.
are not people that have really been held to a high pedestal in society, but their contribution over the
Right.
past several months clearly outweighs any contribution I could have made over the past several months. So I think you really
Mm-hmm.
look at everybody's unique value in society, um, and
Right.
it's really eye opening. It's really interesting.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, even like uh, people who pick up your
Yeah,
garbage. I mean, they're
yeah,
essential too. And yeah, I think you're right. We do kind of. I don't know if demonize is the right word, but we certainly as a society, and I'm not saying you and I, just in
mm-hmm.
general terms, do look down on some jobs that, like you said, are definitely vital. And it's me, and again, as I said, I've been talking COVID quite
Yeah,
extensively. And actually, even Zara was saying to me the other day that, like, you do something more positive. Stop talking about COVID. And I'm like, well, I've got Tawfiq coming on, and we're gonna probably be talking some COVID. But I don't think that talking COVID has to all be doom
yeah,
and gloom. I think that there is an idealistic side of me too that hopes that there's going to be some good coming out of this. Maybe some positive changes. Maybe society as a whole might start to reevaluate our carbon emission in terms of like at least for me personally, like I'm using almost no
yeah,
gas. I'm barely driving at all. And we've seen some improvements in different areas, and also getting a little bit on the political side. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, as you
hmm,
probably know, and I was kind of pushing about emergency socialism and everything, and how I personally believed that like a lot of the problems that we had with passing, like we had to pass a lot of emergency stimulus
yeah,
bills to just for people to be able to afford the emergency care they needed. If we had universal health care already, then that wouldn't have been
yeah,
an issue. So the idealistic me hopes that maybe this might have some long-term positive outcomes. But I guess we'll just have to
yeah.
wait and see.
I think on that point, I think a taker we have is that a lot of us were a lot more similar than we are different. I think we've been so busy, especially this past few years with the administration we have, really identifying ourselves based on our differences, mostly political
Right,
differences, but
right,
seeing the challenges we've had in society over the past several months, whether it's the COVID-19, the disease itself, or it's the financial implications of it, or it's employment challenges, or it's societal churches and mosques and synagogues closing. We're all in the same boat, um, and it's
right,
more than just us in Sacramento, or California, the U.S. I think internationally, we really see that humanity is in the same boat. We're a
right,
lot more connected than we are separate. Going back to the phase you talked earlier about technology, we're a lot more connected than we are separate. And I think we've seen the implications that a devastating virus or disease has to bring us closer in one way or another. We just hope that this is not short lived, and we hope we don't go back to hating each other and wanting to kill each other and burn each other at the stake
right.
shortly thereafter. But
Yeah,
obviously, there are political overtones and undertones in everything that happens in the country. And so we'll
right.
see. We'll see how things play out. I remain hopeful. To a certain extent, I remain hopeful
Yeah,
that at least the people who have been implicated in a negative way, the people that have said, I lost my job. They say, all right, there's more to life than hating my neighbor because he's from a different political party. There is more to life than having an issue with this. Hey, my kids don't have a school to go to, for example. That's a big issue. Someone might not have
right.
healthcare insurance. That's a big issue, and hopefully, these issues, the seriousness of these issues, transcend a lot of the trivial issues that we're so busy, we're so caught up with on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. A point you bring up that I think a lot of your beliefs is kind of based on your
Yeah,
needs. I mean, if you grow up in a place of poverty and you don't have as much, maybe you value those sorts of things, such as universal health care or the
yeah,
like, versus somebody who grew up with a lot of privilege, maybe doesn't think as much. And maybe to your point about this whole experience, maybe it will open because of there have been more people that have been affected by it, or at minimum somebody who's been affected by it, and one can just hope that we have some
yeah,
positive outcome in the
yeah. I
long
mean,
run.
it's as we mentioned earlier when you and I were chatting offline, I don't think there's any family that has not been affected by this. There's no person who has not been affected by this, be it physically, if they or themselves or a loved one or a friend has went through the healthcare challenges of COVID-19. Financially, if they're either a business owner or an employee or an employer who has had some financial implication. Um, Maybe mentally, if you're a mom or a dad and you realize that, hey, you're weighing, you got to pick a choice now. Do you stay at home and take care of your kids because they're no longer in school 8 hours a day, or do you go to work because you need an income? And
Right.
it's a challenge, and a lot of people, we're seeing challenges. We're seeing the emotional strains putting on families. Nobody has not been affected by it, and so
Right.
taking that and appreciating the fact that we're all in this boat one way or another. We're all in this boat somehow.
Right.
It should
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, we hope, realign some priorities that we have as a society, and that
Right.
realignment we hope comes sooner rather than later, and it brings more good in the long term than it does
Yeah.
bring a challenge and hatred and animosity and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, I know that you're a busy man. Your work in Louisiana. Well, you commute back and forth, right? Your office
Yeah, yeah.
is
I,
here in
I,
Elk
I
Grove.
maintain my work in
Uh,
California. I have split some time in a lot of places, so I come to Louisiana every couple of weeks, and in California also often. It's the other half of that,
right.
and when it was available with technology now, you mentioned it's crazy because during this COVID-19 thing, I came to the South a few not too long ago, and I've been delaying travel to go back just because you don't want to take part in the airfare. You don't know what the challenges are, and we've still been able to work with technology nowadays. Like you and I are chatting now on Zoom. It's probably going to be the same in California for quite a while. And I have a lot of clients that we're doing
Right.
real estate transactions, we're doing estate planning, business deals, even some litigation platforms we're doing, all through technology without having to do
Right.
in person work. Hopefully one day we can be in some tropical paradise doing work. Hopefully, it's good to
Right.
dream, right? You can be in some tropical paradise doing
Mm-hmm.
work as long as you have the internet connection. You can be doing that. But it's
Right.
really a sign of how
Yeah.
advanced I think technology's become and how it impacts each and every industry to get a job done. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No. I think it's really incredible how much things are changing. But I'm super appreciative of
Thanks
you
for
for
having
coming
me, man.
on. Like I said, yeah, I mean, I really give you major props on your website, and your videos are very professional looking, and um, for anybody that's watching or listening right now, Mr. Tawfiq Marar is a Class A individual, and you would not go wrong with reaching out to him if
Thanks,
you needed
thanks,
something.
thanks for the upkeep and the talks, Chris. I appreciate it. I'm always here if you got any questions. For anyone listening out there, you can always go to my website, morarlaw.com, morarlaw.com. You can give our office a call. The phone number's on the website as well. Anything you guys need, reach out. And thanks for having me, Chris. It was really nice chatting with you. And we'll talk soon as
Yeah,
well, for
you
sure.
too.
Thanks,
Stay safe out
thanks.
there in
Appreciate it,
Louisiana.
appreciate it. Thanks. Take care.
All right, man.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you once again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. We will definitely be having Mr. Tawfiq Morar back very soon to provide more important knowledge and insight. You can check him out at morarlaw.com. That's MORRAR law.com. Definitely recommend checking him out. He has blogs. He does a series of videos, and as he said in the podcast, just a lot of good free resources. And as I said, there's so much out there in the way of social media. It's hard to know what's good and what's wrong. And I can definitely vouch for Tawfiq. So definitely check him out. And I will be talking with you guys again very soon. Thanks again. And remember, don't be afraid to question the consensus.